Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from up there, it's another special edition review. It is my review of the Shout Factory release of the third entry in Hammer's Frankenstein series, and the one that was co-produced by Universal Pictures, The Evil of Frankenstein. Like a lot of their special editions, this has the reversible insert. There's the one with the original poster, even though that's just one of the original posters, but I kind of like that one. And then there's the one that they did for theirs, which is a pretty decent poster. I mean, they've done better ones. My main issue with this is that you can kind of see how bad the makeup on the monster looked. Whereas you kind of see that on the other one, but it's a little bit more stylized. Whereas this one, if you look closely at it, you can even see some of the flaking makeup, which is one of my complaints about that. I mean, I did a review of the movie itself, so if you want to hear my thoughts on the film proper, watch that. This is going to be more about the features, which some of the stuff I do bring up, but it was appropriate for that point from an analytical perspective. Now for this, the only feature I have not watched at press time is the audio commentary with film historian Konstantin Nassar. And I usually do like commentary, so eventually when I get around to it, I will, in the little below right about now, put what my thoughts on the commentary are. But it's always good to hear commentaries with film historians, especially if it's one that focuses in that specific one. Even though it's not Shout Factory, the Criterion Collection release of the first Godzilla film, that commentary over both versions of the film, a lot of historical insight, and for the Americanized version, adds some context to why they did it. Was a sign of faith in the movie at the time. Now, every other feature on here I can talk about, so we're going to go mainly in order, but I'm going to talk about this. Theatrical trailer, it's the original trailer, it's what you would expect. Very basic feature, but I'm glad they include it. After this, we got the making of The Evil of Frankenstein, which, as it sounds, it is a making of feature narrated by Edward de Souza, and it features interviews with actors. It says Peter Cushing, but it's more like older stuff involving him, Karen Gardner. You got the associate director Hugh Harlow in there. You got the script continuity Paula Harlow, Wayne Kinsley, and the art director. And it's a very fun making of documentary. The narration's good. The editing with all the photos is good. They got a lot of behind the scenes photos edited in there. They got some concept art edited in there, so you can see other versions they had for the makeup design, some of the history behind the film, a lot of the making of, how much money they don't go fully into it with how much the film cost, but they're talking about how they had to be very conservative with the budget. Universal did help finance them, so they could use some of the elements from some of their films. Just all around the making of it, how for the TV version they filmed additional scenes, or additional scenes were filmed, which, as an aside, the TV version is a special feature on here, which I watched the first half of it just to see how it flowed with some of the additional scenes. The additional scenes don't really feel that intrusive from a movie flow perspective, but from a tone perspective, it's a little weird. The only thing it really adds is a reason why the one girl is mute, because that really is never explained. But with that and having a backstory with the monster, it does help a little bit, even though in the final film before that, you could just say it's from one outsider to another, which could be another reference to the Universal films with Igor having his friendship with the Karloff monster. Or it brings up some of the history of the Frankenstein films from Hammer before this, and brings it into context with why this film does kind of break the continuity between its predecessors, which is a nice thing to mention, talking about the screenwriting process. They bring up Terence Fisher a little bit, and then his succession by Freddie Francis, but it's not really gone into super detail with, just enough for the purposes of the documentary. And all in all, it's a very fun documentary. If you're a Hammer fan, definitely that alone is worth the purchase. The film itself, 4K scan, I mean, I don't got a 4K TV, but it looked excellent there. Maybe that's why I was able to notice the flaking on the makeup more, because sometimes those higher resolution scans can do a disservice to certain films. I mean, just look at Sleepaway Camp when you can notice it's a boy. It looks more like a boy wearing a wig than Angela. So there's to you. But even looking at it in lower quality scans, you're like, yeah, that is a problem. There's a feature in The Men That Made Hammer about Freddie Francis where they talk about his career, how he started as a cinematographer, won an Academy Award, worked on some earlier Hammer films. He wanted to be a director, but the main reason he wasn't as successful as a director as he was as a cinematographer is twofold. One, that he wasn't getting films with the best scripts, and part of that connects with the second one, and that was he was mainly a horror director. And that was because in Britain at that time, if you directed horror films, that's all you directed. You were a horror director. They never let you do anything else because you got that stigma, which is kind of a same thing with some of the actors. You got typecast as a horror actor, kind of like how they mention. I think they mentioned it in this one and in the other documentary too. In that, well, with Peter Cushing, he was doing TV and films, but he kind of had to decide on to do one because you're either a TV actor or a film actor. It's not like nowadays where you can easily jump back and forth between the two mediums with no issue, other than maybe scheduling issues, and you're not going to be thought of any less. Then it's either you either did TV, which some actors thought was cheapening your art, or you did film, which was seen as highbrow class. Get the champagne, we shall look at this art. The tables have turned when you look at that in retrospect. Well, Freddie was typecast as a horror director. And of the horror films that he did that I know of as a director, I think his Tales from the Crypt is a better film, which, funny enough, Peter Cushing was in that one, and Peter Cushing's segment is one of the better parts of the movie. But see him start with this one and do some other ones, you can understand why at the end of the day he decided to jump back to being a cinematographer, and I think he had some of his best later career success as a cinematographer. I mean, he helmed The Elephant Man, and the way they make it out, he was one of the ones that was like, yeah, we got to do this in black and white. It's been a while since I've seen that film, but a lot of those shots are framed nicely, focused well, and the makeup on John Hurt looks excellent. Part of that is due to this makeup artist, and part of that is to Freddie Francis making sure that it was filmed correctly. Then, of course, he also did Dune, which they mentioned that he did not want to talk about Dune. That's one thing that him and the director have in common in that film is that they refuse to talk about it. And part of the reason with that is part of his issue with doing a film like this as well, and that was that he did not like doing special effects films. Which, from either a directing standpoint or a cinematographer standpoint, I can understand, because if it's not your strong suit, they can be a pain. Even if it's basic special effects. Like, you have more basic ones for this one, but for, I guess, the budget, they would be considered outlandish. But when you get to Dune, there's a lot of stuff just from the Baron and his flying suit alone. But then when you get to the more outrageous stuff like the sandworms, riding the sandworms, all the more science fiction-y stuff, you definitely could see why he was out of his element there. But then for a later film that he won his second Oscar for, he was back in his element with Glory. And that film looks excellent. Like, the ending scene alone, you can see why he won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography there. And I will have to clap and for that. He did an excellent job there. And they mentioned that the last film he did was with David Lynch as well, which is a David Lynch film I haven't heard of. That he could only work for 5 hours a day at that point, and Lynch agreed to it, and then they went through it. And then mentioned in the last few years nothing, and at the end of it there is a nice little in loving memory thing, which that's a good thing. So there's an interview with assistant director William Cathridge on the film. It's just William talking about his memories of making it, some stuff about Freddie and other things with the film. Some of it does kind of cross over with the other ones, but most of it is original to this interview, and it's a nice interview to watch. There's the Tales of Frankenstein TV pilot, which it's in decent quality, but you can tell it was made for TV from years ago, and it hasn't been cleaned up super well, but enough to be viewable. I watched only the first couple minutes of it before turning it off. It's like not really much to watch. Some plot elements, from what I've read up, were reused for this film, and it seems to be in the public domain, at least according to Wikipedia, so take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. I can understand when they throw it on there as a feature. Nice little bit of horror history to keep in mind. Maybe one of these days I'll watch it properly and do a review on it. Karen Gardner, who plays the Burgermaster's wife in a couple scenes, they have a little bit of an interview with her. They call it a moment with her instead of an interview, because it is shorter than the other interview with Kathy Wilde. And it's nice to hear her talk about it, mainly talking about her figure back then, the outfit she was wearing, the attention she would get from it. It's an interesting little one. I mean, her character is essentially just there to look good and be pretty in a couple scenes and then scream when the action comes into the Boogermaster's house. And of course, when he gets killed by the monster, she does give her memories about filming that scene. It is pretty good. Kathy Wild's interview, on the other hand, is a lot better. It's her talking about her character, how her acting ideas from it, how Freddie Francis, while it wasn't what he was going for at first, he was open to it, which that's a sign of a good director, at least when working with actors, where they're open to your ideas and suggestions, as long as it doesn't affect the main big plot, just the little moments involving your character. And he was open to it and allowed for it, partially due to her philosophy when it comes to acting, and this is a philosophy that any actor should be going with, is when you're doing your research into the role and interpreting the role, you should always strive to be truthful. Search for truth, as she put it. Because you have to believe this is what the character you're playing would be doing and how they'd be feeling and how they'd be reacting to this. Because if you don't believe it, even if you're the best actor, that's going to show a little bit in your performance. And the people watching it might go, I don't believe you. And with her, since her entire performance is facial expression and body language, you even more got to sell the audience with your reactions. And even though she has no dialogue, other than maybe some weird noises, Kathy did a good job, as I say in my review. So it's a nice little interview to see from her. All in all, this is a great Shout Factory release of their new recent ones. I haven't really watched a lot of Hammer's horror films other than James Rolfe's Cinemassacre reviews of the Frankenstein and Dracula series, and even though I have a couple more I gotta walk through, I've mainly been collecting them just to start marathon watching through them. And I can say this is one series I'm actually happy that Shout Factory got the rights to release, because as James Rolfe put it at the end of both of those ones, for years both of these series were in limbo when it came to being able to find them regularly. I mean, you can find a couple of them, and it's over there somewhere, but I have a copy from Turner Classic Movies that has Curse of Frankenstein, I believe it has Evil of Frankenstein on it, and there's also one over there, there's a 4-pack, has a couple of the Hammer Dracula films on it. But then other ones, you'd have to either pay money out in order to find it, be lucky enough to see it on TV, or just do what me, Mike, and a couple others are always doing, and browsing thrift stores and something, and hope for the grace of God that you come across a copy of one that's in at least watchable condition and is not price gouged. So for them releasing all of them, good. And I got a lot of them over here, which I'm going to show you. I mean, I don't have all of them, obviously, but I've been collecting a lot of these ones, and I'm going to slowly be making my way through them, like with the Frankenstein one, just for an example. These are all the ones I got. The only one of the Cushing ones I haven't gotten yet on that one is Curse, and that's because I have the DVD over there, so I'm not in the biggest hurry to get that one in the collection. But so I gotta really clap for Shout Factory. Say what you want about some of the questionable films they've been doing and some other business decisions, but when it comes to the Hammer ones, good. They're finally doing one thing that is appropriate for the fans and a godsend to us, and that is releasing a series under their banner that was hard to find before, at least over here in Region 1. In Britain, they were probably a lot easier to find. It's like some versions of the Godzilla films were a lot easier to find in Japan, which, of course, since I'm bringing that up as a side, I could thank the Criterion Collection for doing that, which that'll be another one of these reviews down the road. But think about it. How many films do I gotta watch in order to do that one? Final thoughts. The film is decent. The features are pretty good. If you are a Hammer horror fan or a fan of horror in general, this is definitely one you should pick up while it is in stock. If you want to wait for a price drop on the Shout Factory website or just look and see how much it was on Amazon, go ahead. I believe I ordered this one through Amazon. It's kind of hard to remember a lot of them. I mean, the only one I've ordered directly from Shout recently was this one when they were doing the going out of print one, and since I actually kind of like this sequel, I decided to get it. And their set of Friday the 13th. So like I said, fan of Hammer horror film or horror in general, definitely worth a pickup.